Next topic is project management overview. Project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques applied to project activities in order to meet the project requirements. Project management is a process that includes planning, putting the project plan into action, and measuring the progress and performance. Project managers can be seen in public and private sectors and many industries including IT, finance, banking, law enforcement agencies, construction, municipalities, etc. For several decades, public sector projects were managed by contractors whose primary objective was to just profit motive. At the end of the project, the contractor would provide the public sector agency with a deliverable, but on many occasions, the contractor would walk away with the project management best practices and lesson learned. Public sector agencies now require contractors to share all project management intellectual properties accumulated during the course of the project with them. Also, with limited uh, resources in times of term, personnel, and finance, public sector agencies are becoming experienced in project management to the point where the projects are managed with internal personnel rather than contractors. Then comes schedule management. A project manager's key responsibility is to create a realistic project schedule. Before the project execution begins, the project manager should identify if the planned end date is achievable. There are several project management software available in the market. The project managers can use this software to assist with the scheduling in their real life projects. However, if you want to clear the PMP exam, you must thoroughly understand the process of scheduling a project. You must also know the process of manually drawing the network diagram to answer questions about network diagrams and scheduling. Each project is unique, and the software which we use can't adapt to the uniqueness of the project needs. It was identified that making a list is not appropriate as compared to creating a work breakdown structure. So what is work breakdown structure? It's a deliverable-oriented hierarchical decomposition of the work to be executed by the project team to accomplish a team mission and create the required deliverables. And work breakdown structure is mainly used to define the project scope. The project scope contains the goals of the project, deliverables of the project, tasks, costs, and deadlines. The schedule development process must generate the project schedule that must consider or satisfy the given criteria like complete, realistic, and accepted. Complete means the schedule must represent all the works to be done. Realistic means the schedule must be realistic with regard to the time expectations and availabilities of the human resource to participate. Then comes accepted means it should have a support, buy-in from the team members and stakeholders, especially the beneficiaries. So a risk can be termed as any uncertain event or condition that might affect your project. Not all risks are negative. Some events like finding an easier way to do an activity or conditions like lower prices for certain materials can help your project. When this happens, we call it as an opportunity, but it's still handled just like a risk. There are no guarantees on any project. Even the simplest activity can turn into unexpected problems.
Anything that might occur to change the outcome of a project activity, we call that as a risk. A risk can be an event or it can be a condition. Either way, it's something that may or may not happen. But if it does, then it will force you to change the way you and your team work on the project. If your project requires that you stand on the edge of a cliff, then there is a risk that you could fall. If it's very windy out or if the ground is slippery and uneven, then falling is most likely. When you are planning your project, risks are still uncertain. They haven't happened yet, but eventually some of the risks that you plan for to happen, and that's when you have to deal with them. There are four basic ways to handle the risk: avoid the risk, mitigate the risk, transfer the risk, and accept the risk. So risk management is the act or practice of dealing with the project risk. It includes planning for risk, assessing the risk, developing a risk response strategy, and monitoring the risk to determine how the risk could able to change the project life cycle. So the project risk, we can tell, is the effect of uncertainty on the project as a whole arising from all sources of uncertainty, includes individual risk representing the exposure of stakeholders to the implications of variations in project outcome, both positive and negative. The risk management plan tells you how you are going to handle the risk in your project. It documents how you will assess the risk, who is responsible for doing it, and how often you will do risk planning. Some risks are technical, like a component that might turn out to be difficult to use otherwise. Some others are external, like changes in the market or even problems with the weather. So the project risk management includes the process of conducting risk management planning, identification, indentation, analysis, response planning, response implementation, and monitoring risk on the project. The objective of the risk management plan or the project risk management is to increase the probability or impact of positive risk and to decrease the negative risks in order to optimize the chances of getting the project to be successful. Why we are telling risk management is important? Because it will help to avoid the litigation, that means the process of taking legal actions against the company, revenue loss, and reputation, which means the negative public perception. Risk management elements are risk identification. So it's a more disciplined process involved using checklist of potential risks and evaluating the likelihood that those events might happen on the project. Some companies and industries develop risk checklists based on experience from their past projects. So identifying the sources of risk by category is another method for exploring the potential risk of a project. Some of them are like technical, cost, schedule, client, contractual, weather, financial, political, environmental, and people. So sometimes what we will do, how we are making the framework for work breakdown structure, the same way we will prepare the risk breakdown structure also. So what exactly the risk breakdown structure organizes is that have been identified into categories using a table with increasing level of details to the right. That is like in the first column, it will be the task. Second column, the potential risk. Second one is risk assessment. So risk assessment means it is the kind of impact of the risk on the given project or task. So once the potential risk has been identified, the project team then evaluate or assess each risk based on the probability that the risk event will occur and the potential loss associated with it or the potential impact associated with it. As I mentioned already, not all risks are equal. Some risk events are more likely to happen than others, and the cost of a risk can vary greatly. Evaluating the risk for probability of occurrence and the severity of the potential loss to the project is the next step in the risk management process. Third one is risk mitigation. So risk mitigation, once if the risk is identified and evaluated or assessed, the project team try to develop a risk mitigation plan, which is a plan to reduce the impact of the unexpected events. So during mitigation, we will do various ways like risk avoidance, risk sharing, risk reduction, and risk transfer. So these are all the four kinds of categories or ways to deal with the risk. The first one is risk avoidance. It usually involves developing an alternative strategy that has a higher probability of success, but usually at the higher cost associated with accomplishing a project risk. Next one is risk reduction. It is an investment of funds to reduce the risk on the project. Third one is risk acceptance. That is involving partnering with others to share responsibility for the risky activities. Fourth one is risk transfer. So it is a risk reduction method that shifts the risk from the project to another party. The purpose of insurance on certain items is a risk transfer method. Resource requirements. Human or labor resources. It may include consulting services consisting of the right people with the expertise and skills needed for completing the activities on the project schedule within the schedule and within the time. Equipment and material resources, all specialized tools needed for the project. Financial resources, nothing but the project budget, and time resources, the period of time available and used for the completion of each task. And the duration of the task will depend on the planned and available human. Budget estimates. So we will make three estimates like a rough estimate, contract estimate, and definitive estimates. So the rough estimate will make during the pre-proposal stage of the project. So the accuracy is like low. Then contract estimates during the initiation phase, and it is medium. And definitive estimates during the planning phase, it is high, -5% to 10%. Difference between projects and operations. Projects are temporary and unique, whereas that of operations are ongoing and repetitive. The purpose of a project is to attain its objective and then complete, that means terminate, close. But the purpose of an ongoing operation is to sustain the business for a long period of time. The project concludes when its specified objectives have been achieved, but operations adopt new set of objectives and the work continues in the organization. Customer satisfaction. Some of the roles and responsibilities or skills of a project manager like leadership, team building, motivation, communication, influencing, decision making, political and cultural awareness, negotiation, trust building, conflict management, and coaching. As a question, how many projects can a project manager handle at one time? Generally, we can tell we can handle multiple projects, but each project should be unique in nature. So this is the project management life cycle, starting from initiation, planning, execution, controlling, that means monitoring and controlling, and then closing. In the initiation phase, performed to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project by obtaining to start the project or project phase. Is planning. It requires to establish the scope of the project, define the objectives, and define the course of action required to attain the objectives that the project was undertaken to achieve. Comes execution. So this we will normally tell you as work in action. Perform to complete the work defined in the project management plan to satisfy the project specific. Controlling. This requires to track, review, and regulate the progress and performance of the project. Identify any areas which changes to the plan are required and intimate the corresponding changes, the scope changes which we generally tell. Finally, the closing phase. Those processes performed to finalize all the activities across all project process groups to formally close the project or the phase. So some of the works done during the project execution that generally the project team should direct and manage are perform activities to accomplish the project requirements, creating the project deliverables, staff train and manage the team members assigned to the project, obtain, manage and use of resources including materials, tools, equipments, facilities, etc. Implement the planned methods and standards, establish and manage the project communication channels, both external and internal to the project team, generate project data such as cost, schedule, technical and quality progress and status to facilitate the forecasting, issue change request and adapt approved or acceptable changes into the project scope, plans and environment, manage risk and implement risk response activities, manage sellers and suppliers, collect and document the lesson learned. The approved changes, corrective action, what do you do to rectify? Preventive action is to minimize the risk, and defect repair to correct a manufacturing problem. Monitoring and control a project or a process is concerned with comparing the actual performance of the project with the project management plan, assess the performance in order to determine if there exist or there need any changes, identify new risk, track, monitor the existing project risk, and also to provide a risk mitigation strategy, provide information to support the status reporting, progress measurement and forecasting, and also to forward the same to the senior management, provide forecast to upgrade current cost and current schedule information, and as well as update the documents, monitor the implementation of approved changes, whether it has any effect on the schedule or budget. So 90% of the project manager's role is about communication.